Chernobyl. I feel like I genuinely don't have to explain this one because everyone knows what happened to Chernobyl, but I must admit the HBO series was overhyped for me personally, but it was #1 in the world for a while, so I mean I caved and I watched it. Either way, back in April of 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine ran a routine safety test that they technically shouldn't have done but did so anyways. The tests were being run in case of a power outage to find a way to maintain the reactor's cooling water circulation until the backup generators could provide power, because if they couldn't find a way to do this, then the nuclear reactor core could overheat and that would be disastrous. The fourth test was delayed by 10 hours, meaning an unprepared staff member was on duty. While doing the test, the reactor malfunctioned and the reactor core itself actually exploded. That one explosion caused tons of radiation and radioactive gas and debris to circulate in the air, affecting people in the area and people far from it as well. The scientist in charge at the time refused to believe the reactor core had blown up and was proper in denial. Even after workers went in there and saw the blown up core, he didn't believe it. So thinking it wasn't as bad as it was, he told the plant owner it wasn't that bad, who told government officials it wasn't that bad, who told the locals of Pripyat it was not that bad. So these innocent kids and families and pets were roaming around this critically dangerous radioactive city for days before finding out the truth. And when the government leaves you exposed to toxic radiation just to cover their own arse, that's how you know the world is screwed, people.
In our #9 spot today, we have the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Back in 1986, there was the tragic event of the accidental nuclear meltdown at the Chernobyl nuclear plant. The aftermath of this disaster took many lives, and it also rendered the area unsafe for years to come. While some of the areas surrounding the disaster are relatively safe now, there is still an area called the Chernobyl exclusion zone, which is strictly forbidden because of the radioactive contamination. You would think that the threat of a horrible death, or at least some painful side effects, might be enough to keep people out, but that is not the case. Throughout the years, people have continually tried to sneak into this zone to catch a glimpse at what exactly it holds. In our #8 spot today, we have Zone Rouge. This area, also referred to as the Red Zone, is an area of France that is one of the most restricted on Earth. Located in northeastern France, it is said that this chain of uninhabited areas was completely destroyed after the events of the First World War. This area contains a mass amount of both human and animal remains, along with way too many unexploded weapons that have gone on to contaminate the surrounding water and land. This has led to the French government prohibiting any kind of activity in the areas that includes any sort of agricultural or settlement. I mean, I wouldn't particularly want to risk it with an undetonated explosive, so it completely makes sense why this area would be restricted. In our #7 spot today, we have Snake Island. This island is located in Brazil and is one of the most dangerous in the entire world, and that is because it is absolutely filled to the brim with snakes. It is thought that Snake Island came to be when the snakes got trapped as a result of the rising sea levels, which disconnected this island from the mainland. The reason people aren't allowed to visit is obviously to protect the humans who want to go, but also to protect the snakes that live here, as some of them aren't seen anywhere else in the world, likely because of the lack of human interference. There's a critically endangered species of snake called a golden lancehead, and on this island there are about 4,000 of them, which is critical to the species being able to continue on. As of now, only a few select researchers and the Brazilian Navy are permitted to go to the island. In our #6 spot today, we have Area 51. This is probably one of the most famous of all of the prohibited places, and that is likely because of just how many stories and conspiracy theories are surrounding it. Area 51 is a US military installation that the government insisted didn't exist until 2013. The area is said to mainly be used as a testing site by the CIA and the US Air Force because of its remote location 100 miles north of Las Vegas, but people don't buy it. People seriously believe that this site could be holding things like crashed UFOs, actual aliens, mermaids, you know, conspiracy theory stuff. At the end of the day, whether it's aliens or testing technology, the stuff that they are doing there is super secret, and there's a reason it's so protected. That hasn't stopped many people from trying to go there over the years, however. I mean, remember a couple years back when people wanted to storm it? Yeah. Good luck. In our #5 spot today, we have Mount OMINE. This mountain is the home of the Yamabushi monks, and it is famous for its 3 tests of courage. So not everyone is banned from this place, but women sure are. The ban on women was placed in order to help remove thoughts of temptations from the monks as they practiced their strict lifestyle. Here's the thing with this rule though. there have been many females who have still gone here. They refer to the ban as a more voluntary situation. Both the temple and the local community call it a request rather than a rule or a law, and the request is in order to respect their tradition, as well as, of course, like I mentioned before, to help them. In our number 4 spot today we have Morgan Island. This is a place that is also referred to as Monkey Island, and this is due to the colony of about 4,000 rhesus monkeys who call this place home. The thing is though, the monkeys aren't originally from this South Carolina island, they were actually relocated here from Puerto Rico. Basically, these monkeys were living in a sort of research center before moving to this island, but it was becoming overpopulated and some of the monkeys who carried infectious diseases were escaping, which posed quite a health and safety risk. This is when South Carolina stepped in and offered this uninhabited island as a place for these monkeys to go and continue to be researched. There are now laws that prohibit anyone from the island for both yours as well as the monkeys' safety. In our number 3 spot today we have Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is a privately owned campsite in Monterey in California, and it's the home to the wealthy and exclusive Bohemian Club. This club is only for some exclusive groups of men, despite the few dire attempts at including women. Every year there is a 2-week-long retreat that the club hosts on the private grounds, and while there have been 4 women who have been invited to the club as honorary members, the women are never invited to the Grove. Because of this weird ban and just the entire super strange nature of this whole ordeal, both the club and the Grove are part of many conspiracy theories. There has been no shortage of outsiders trying to sneak into the Grove to see what the heck is going on there and to see if they can get to the bottom of what this secretive club is really hiding. To be honest, there's definitely something sketchy going on with this whole thing, because it really just does give off like the weirdest vibes. They also have this weird club motto that says, quote, "Weaving spiders come not here." I'm not sure what that means, but it definitely sounds weird. Just a bunch of guys hanging out and no one else is allowed. I don't know, it's weird. Bohemian Grove has entered the chat. They're mad at me. In our number 2 spot today we have Metro 2. During the time where Stalin was in power, it is said that he instructed that an underground secret transport system would be built known as Metro 2. This mysterious underground system is said to connect different administrative institutions, and it's even rumored that it contains apartments and different technical rooms. It's sort of like a secret escape tunnel for high-level officials. Of course, it's completely blocked off to outsiders or the general public, and while the Moscow Metro administration denies that these tunnels even exist, there was an urban exploration group back in 1994 that claimed to have found the entrance. At this point in time, the existence of only one of the rumored 4 lines has been confirmed, and it is called D6. In our number 1 spot today we have the Fukushima exclusion zone. Back in 2011 there was the Fukushima nuclear disaster which struck Japan. Because of this horrible incident, residents located within 18 miles of the plant were urged to evacuate, similar to the Chernobyl nuclear disaster we talked about before. In fact, this meltdown and Chernobyl's are the only 2 events to receive a level 7 event classification on the International Nuclear Event Scale. Because of this extreme radiation contamination, no one is allowed to enter the premises. Of course, I can't see why anyone would want to, but there are people who want to take the risk. This includes a 27-year-old photographer who decided to illegally sneak into the Fukushima exclusion zone. He explained that it looked like a real-life version of Fallout.
Coming into number 10, we have the 2018 Salisbury poisoning cover-up. This is a very sensitive topic indeed, and even caused the Russian and British governments to come to blows in a war of words. What happened was that a former Russian military officer and double agent for the UK intelligence service was poisoned in Salisbury. He and his daughter received a nasty dose. Now, Sergei and Yulia Skripal were targeted and spent 3 weeks in hospital. Luckily, they didn't die. Public Health England issued advice for people who visited the Mill Pub and Zizi restaurant, where Mr. Skripal and his daughter ate and drank before falling ill. They told people who had been there to wash their clothes and belongings and seal off anything that cannot be manually cleaned. Some weeks later, a woman died after accidentally handling the nerve agent Novichok discarded by the assassins. Now, one of the Russian chemical weapons scientists has said that hundreds of people in Salisbury could be at risk for years following the attack, attack. British Prime Minister Theresa May said that it was highly likely that the Russian government was responsible, but of course this is Russia. We may find out more information over the next few decades, or we may simply never know.
Coming in at number 9 is the Hubble telescope. Launched in 1990, Hubble was meant to be NASA's greatest observation tool and deliver images of impeccable quality. And I mean, it had the capability since it had inside of it one of the most powerful mirrors ever built, put in by some of the most capable engineers in the world. A man called Lou Montanino was in charge of testing Hubble, but he had no idea that a microscopic chip of paint had come off one of the measuring rods that was meant to make sure the mirror was the right shape. I mean, no he had no idea it was microscopic. How could he even see it with his naked eye? Now, this tiny fleck caused multiple false readings, because of which the mirror ended up being 4 microns off. Do you know how small that is? That's 25 times smaller than the width of a human hair. This tiny mistake made the quality of the pictures Hubble took significantly worse than expected, and by the time they realized why the pictures were it was already in damn space. At number 8, we have the St. Francis Dam. Located in LA, the concrete curved dam was built back in 1926 to regulate and store a reservoir for the city. The project was headed by William Mulholland, the chief engineer and manager at the LA Department of Water and Power. William designed it himself and oversaw the entirety of its construction, but as it started filling up, there were many contraction cracks and seepage that ended up showing up. William decided to exclude contraction joints from his design, and soon there were 2 long vertical cracks that ran through the dam from top to bottom. By the end of Feb 1928, there was a huge leak 150 feet west of the main dam that was discharging 4.5 gallons of water per second. William inspected it and said it was just another contraction and left it there to drain. By March, it had doubled and new cracks were forming, but William kept saying everything was normal. Minutes before midnight on March 12th, and only 2 hours after his last inspection, the dam burst open and in the end ended up killing 431 people. Going on the 7th slot is the Ariane 5 rocket. This one was truly disastrous. Honestly, this whole list is disastrous, but this was bad. So the European Space Agency's Ariane 5 rocket was made to propel Europe forward as the head of space exploration. However, its guidance system was running some of the same code as its older sibling, the Ariane 4, and this proved critically bad. 36.7 seconds into its launch, the guidance computer attempted to convert the sideways velocity to a different format. But since the Ariane 5 was faster than the Ariane 4, the velocity conversion generated a number that was just way too big to be represented by a 16-bit signed integer. But since the Ariane 5 was much faster, the velocity conversion generated a number that was too big to be represented by a 16-bit signed integer. All of a sudden, the nozzles of 2 solid rocket boosters as well as the engine swung out of position, nearly detaching the boosters, which resulted in the triggering of a self-destruct mechanism. 39 seconds into its maiden flight, the satellite was completely destroyed, wasting something from $370 to $500 million. Now, number 6, Lights Out Part 1. July 13th, 1977, a system operator at New York's Con Edison Electric facility was just chilling during his shift, probably trying to catch some quick shut-eye or reading a comic probably. Then, in some freak accident, the facility was struck by lightning 3 times, nearly crippling the whole thing. The operator was probably like, I literally did not sign up for this, I'm just trying to go home and get paid. Either way, to make matters worse, neighboring facilities then opened up their connections to the Con Ed system so their own systems wouldn't overload. Now at this point, everything is about to go tits up unless this operator flips a bunch of switches quickly and in the right order. He started going at it, but he somehow managed to flip one switch out of order, and within minutes, a massive 230,000 volts connection to New Jersey was closed and the entire Con Ed system shut down. Now, what did that mean, you might be wondering? Well, let's get into it. Coming in at number 5 are Lights Out Part 2. Now, this tiny mistake of flipping one switch in the wrong order resulted in New York City being without electricity for 25 hours. And just think about the time this is happening. It's July, so it's bloody hot, and the son of Sam, serial killer, was on the loose as well, so no one was having this. What resulted during the blackout was parties on the streets turning very quickly into violent riots and stealing. People started smashing in store windows, committing arson, destroying property, and more. By the time the lights came on, 1,037 fires had been set, 3,776 people had been arrested, and 1,616 shops had been damaged. The loss was about 300 million, but apparently this disaster actually created hip-hop. It gave poor inner-city youths access to DJ equipment since they stole it, so I mean, good did come of this. At number 4 is the Challenger. On the 28th of January 1986, NASA's Challenger space shuttle was set to take off. However, 73 seconds into the launch, the entire shuttle exploded, killing all 7 crew members inside. Gobsmacked on what went wrong, it took NASA a while to discover it was due to the O-rings on the craft. O-rings are bits of a solid rocket boosters that can actually withstand immense amounts of pressure per square inch. Pressure the O-rings can handle, but temperatures not so much. They're not designed to operate at low temperatures, and the day of the launch was weirdly colder than usual. And because of that, the O-ring seal failed during the launch and was quickly resealed by aluminium oxides from the rocket. However, strong wind caused it to tear apart seconds later, and thus disaster struck. The loss was estimated to be $5.5 billion, not to mention 7 lives. Filling in Cruiser is Reply All. Admittedly, this one made me laugh quite a bit, so I thought I would include it for some relief. So back in 2009, the admissions staff at UC San Diego were getting back to applicants about whether or not they had been accepted into the college. But the staff accidentally used the wrong database for the task, meaning they ended up sending out acceptance emails to every single person who had applied for the fall 2009 session, including people who had already gotten their rejection emails. 46,000 people got the acceptance email despite only 18,000 of them actually being accepted. They then obviously had to work around the clock apologizing to 29,000 people and their parents about the false acceptance. Imagine being so upset about not getting into your dream school, then getting an email saying you did in fact get in, and then having your hopes and dreams reignited to then be told it was an accidental email. I'd be pissed. Now, number 2 is the N1 rocket. Now, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the US were engaged in a very serious arms race, and honestly, it was just a pissing contest to see which country could excel in every facet of life. So during the 60s, the Soviets developed the N1 rocket, which was meant to be the Soviet version for the US's Saturn V moon rocket. Saturn V had 5 huge engines, but the Soviets decided instead of having a small number of big engines, they'd have 30 small ones, which could have gone brilliantly or horribly, and unfortunately, it was the latter. On a second launch attempt, a bolt came loose and was then sucked into the fuel pump just as the rocket was traveling through the atmosphere. As soon as it was sucked in, it caused a major explosion that spread to all of the other engine in matchstick fashion, and thus the rocket plummeted to Earth while still exploding. This epic fail left the Soviet moon program bankrupt, and the Soviet Union denied this event happened for like 40 more years. Like, bruh, it happened. We saw it happening in the sky. And finally, at number 1 is the Lost Orbiter. Honestly, NASA's on the list a lot more than I'd like it to be, considering they're meant to be a collection of some of the most brilliant minds in the world. But anyway, the Mars Climate Orbiter was part of the Mars Survey project that took place back in 1998. The project was developed in order to study climate and weather patterns on Mars so we can obviously move there one day. Lockheed Martin was hired to help build the orbiter, and he installed the software and the spacecraft thrusters in Imperial units. However, nobody told NASA that, and they continued doing their thing in metric units. Personally, I do metric. I hate when someone tells me how much they weigh in pounds or says something in inches like that. None of that means anything to me. I don't know what that means. Either way, because of this, the Mars Climate Orbiter didn't even land on Mars. The metric units mixed with the Imperial units caused the thrusters to fire wrong, so it came into Mars orbit way lower than expected and then just disappeared altogether. NASA lost $330 million and a lot of dignity. Like, come on people. No one thought to ask what units they were working in? Shocking behavior. And that is it for today's video, guys. Honestly, this one made me laugh. I just like laughing at the misfortune of others. Because, you know, it's not me that's in the wrong.
In our number 10 spot today, we have Pluto's Gate. This is a site that is located in what was once the ancient city of Hierapolis, which resides in what is now Turkey. This site was once dedicated to the Roman god of death, Pluto, and an ancient historian named Strabo, who once went to this location, said that, quote, "Any animal that passes inside meets instant death. I threw in sparrows and they immediately breathed their last and fell." So, yeah. Maybe it's not really an inviting place exactly. Turns out there's more to this than just myth, however. Scientists measured the CO2 concentration at this site and discovered that during the day, this place might be fine, but during the night, the CO2 becomes heavier than air and pools at the bottom, which forms this sort of deadly lake. The reason it's fine during the daytime is because the sun is able to dissipate the gas. It is said that at dawn, the CO2 concentration that was measured 40 centimeters above the floor was at 35%, which would be enough to take a life within minutes.
Coming into number 9, we have the OSTANKINO Tower. The days of Russian radiation poisoning are not said to be over. In the city of Moscow, population 12 million, the OSTANKINO Tower looms. The tower gives out television and radio signals to the city, however it has been accused of being a mutant maker because of the electromagnetic radiation it gives out. While this is a bit of an urban legend, with people saying that huge rats exist in the metro stations because of it, there is a scary truth to it. The Kremlin would never admit it, but a 2005 study showed that people in the Ostankino neighborhood were affected by the tower. In other countries, it's reported that scientists are constantly monitoring radiation given out by broadcast towers, but Russia doesn't appear to be. Coming into number 8, we have the 2016 presidential election interference. There is now evidence to suggest what was long since suspected. Russian intelligence hacked the 2016 United States presidential election. The CIA concluded that Russia acted to help Trump and the Republicans win by releasing thousands of stolen emails, many of which were damaging to the Democratic Party. There is also evidence to suggest that the Russian government were bankrolling troll farms. These are places that generate and spread fake news. Current bipartisan investigations are taking place, but Donald Trump has on many occasions denied any involvement. That being said, following his most recent meeting with Vladimir Putin, Trump seemed to actually admit that maybe they were involved. While words from the United States president have been confusing, Russia, of course, are keeping a stony silence. Coming into number 7, we had state-sponsored doping and FIFA. In 2016, it was revealed that Russia was involved with state-sponsored doping of their Olympic team and that they had been threatening members of the World Anti-Doping Agency. As a result of investigations, it's suspected that between 2011 and 2015, more than 1,000 Russian Olympians benefited from a doping cover-up. Scarily, the investigations also revealed that a lot of the athletes were being given drugs without their knowledge. Anyway, it seems that Russia was back to their old tricks ahead of the FIFA World Cup. There's some evidence to suggest that the Kremlin was bribing FIFA officials ahead of the World Cup to ignore a cheated drugs test. Coming into number 6, we have the ARAL smallpox incident. Not only did Russia test nuclear weapons, they were also testing biological weapons. The ARAL smallpox incident took place in July 1971, but the world only found out about it 30 years later in 2002. In 1971, the USSR knew that a vaccination for smallpox was widely available and that the disease was on the brink of being eradicated. While that sounds like a great thing, these days it means that most of us haven't actually been vaccinated for smallpox, and if sneaky labs like those that existed in the Soviet era are storing the disease, then they could launch biological warfare. Anyway, the Soviets were testing smallpox as a weapon in an open-air environment. This was all happening on an island port on the Aral Sea. Now, the test got out of control and it caused an outbreak on the island. Hundreds of people were quarantined and 50,000 people were vaccinated as a response. The Kremlin have never acknowledged the incident, but Kazakh officials prepared a report that outlined what happened. They concluded that 3 people died and it could have been a lot worse. Nonetheless, the fact that Russia was testing this in the first place is a scary sign. Coming into number 5, we have Metro 2. According to USA declassified government documents, it seems that the Soviet Union built a secret nuclear layer underneath the public subway. In urban legends, this has been dubbed Metro 2, however it seems as if the bunker is no legend. It's suspected that during the Cold War, Stalin built a whole system of secret trains connecting secret bunkers beneath the city. Now this extends below the Moscow Metro and beyond. It is said Stalin codenamed it D6, a code used by by the KGB until 1991 and is still used by the Ministry of Defense to this day. The legend also says that the underground bunker connects the Kremlin, the Federal Security Service headquarters, and the government airport. Some people even say there's an underground town down there, primed and prepped for the nuclear apocalypse. In 1994, so nearly 25 years ago, a group of urban explorers claimed to have found the entrance to Metro 2. I, for one, am wondering who's on the invite list into the bunker if D-Day ever comes. Coming into number 4, we have the Netherlands catastrophe. During the Cold War, both America and Russia were making preparations to attack one another should they have to. What weapons they were creating and how they were developing them was kept a very closely guarded secret until the product was finished. On October the 24th, 1960, the Soviets were testing an intercontinental ballistic missile. Now these are bad news. Either way, early testing didn't go well and the first missile exploded on a launch pad at the Baikonur test range. This killed 100 members of staff, including the Chief Marshal of Artillery, Mitrofan Ivanich Nedelin. Despite the huge scale of the disaster, the USSR covered it up. The Soviet government didn't even acknowledge the event until after 1989. Coming into number 3, we have the lost cosmonauts. This space race was an interesting time for the world. The USA and the USSR were locked into a battle to be the first to discover the secrets of the wider universe. As a result, Russia poured money into funding space research, but things didn't always go smoothly. Because of the competition with the Americans, the Soviets would cover up if anything went wrong, so any disasters or mistakes were totally covered up in order to present a better image of their efforts to the world. There is a conspiracy theory out there that says that Russia sent several astronauts to space before Yuri Gagarin, but their existence has never been acknowledged by the Soviet or Russian authorities. In 1959, a Czech communist leaked information about now-dead astronauts being sent into space and killed. It also alleged that the USSR had several moonshots that ended in launch pad disasters, including deaths of scientists, technicians, and would-be astronauts. Coming into number 2, we have the Chernobyl disaster. On April the 26th, 1986, a nuclear reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. This directly killed 31 people. The explosion caused uncontrolled reaction conditions and created an open-air graphite fire that produced updrafts for 9 days. This spewed radioactive fission products into the air. Now, this radioactive material rained down over wider parts of the USSR and Europe. As a result of wider exposure to radioactivity, it is thought that tens of thousands of people were poisoned, but we don't know an exact figure as the Russian Soviet Union did their best to cover up the wider spread of the catastrophe. We don't even know today. Over 30 years later, we still don't have answers. We still don't know the ins and outs of what happened, but it has been pretty much confirmed that the explosion was down to human error and malpractice. Again, we don't know how much of Europe outside of Russia was exposed to radiation poisoning, as the Soviets tried to minimize the drama and actively stunted the scientific research into the incident. By and large, we have all heard of Chernobyl, but that isn't the only Russian radioactive cover-up, not by a long stretch. Coming into number 1, we have the SEMIPALATINSK tests. Throughout the Soviet era, especially during the Cold War, the USSR tested a lot of nuclear weapons, like a lot. As you may know, the Russians have actually invented the world's most powerful nuclear weapon, the Tsar bomber. That came through exhaustive nuclear tests in facilities across Russian land. One of the most frequently used facilities was SEMIPALATINSK. This is also known as the Polygon. This land is now in the country of Kazakhstan, but was formerly owned by the USSR. Now, the issue with this test site was that, in reality, it wasn't very remote at all. It was actually just upwind was the town of Semi. Now it seems that the Soviets carried out 456 nuclear tests at this facility between 1949 and 1989, with no regard to the effect on the local people or environment. Russian officials hid the full impact of the radiation exposure for years, but since the facility was closed in 1991, more and more scary details have come to light. This, for example, is a strawberry grown in Semi. Here is a man born in Semi in the height of the testing years. Also, there is so little information about the facility out there that the rest of the world has no idea the full extent of sickness inflicted on humans as a result of the testing. How terrifying. So guys, that was the top 10 scary Russian cover-ups. If you're wondering why there isn't so much from modern era Russia, well, I mean, have a look back at this list and consider that it took 30 or more years for Soviet information to come to light. I wonder what this list will look like in 30 years from now.